of Sanaki before withdrawing. US President George W. Bush says Russia's, quote, brutal attacks are jeopardizing its relationship with the West. He called on Russia to agree to an immediate ceasefire with Georgia. He also said Moscow's actions were unacceptable in the 21st century. Russia's ambassador to the UN has said no to a ceasefire proposal drawn up by the Security Council. Ambassador Vitaly Churkin says the draft proposal is lacking in a serious number of areas. Churkin says the draft doesn't mention Georgia's, quote, past aggression in the separatist regions.
Georgian forces reportedly retreated from Gori on Monday after a Russian air raid. Now, Julian Mannion has more on the latest fighting in Georgia and what may come next.
Today, the Georgian president got a taste of the war that he helped to start. Mikhail Saakashvili was visiting the bomb-damaged town of Gori when his staff heard what they believed was the sound of Russian aircraft. They at once bundled the president to the ground and covered him with a protective kevlar blanket. Moments later, Saakashvili was rushed to his car and driven away. Later, in the capital, the president called on the world to help his country.
I want to appeal to the world present consciousness. It's so clear what's happening. We are in the process of invasion, occupation, and annihilation of an independent, democratic country.
Russian jets still roam freely and inspire fear. As we got to a village near the South Ossetian border, a Georgian soldier shouted warnings. The sounds of nearby bombing echoed around the houses.
We are very afraid. It's very dangerous. Most people in this village have fled. The planes are bombing nearby, then coming around and doing it again.
Near the village, smoke rose from an airstrike on a Georgian army position. Georgian troops are trying to avoid the air attacks by keeping on the move. But today, more of their heavy equipment was pulling out. More Georgian armor is pulling back from the border area. The Georgian government insists that its troops have not been humiliated, but the truth is that they and their equipment have not been able to stand up to Russian firepower. And the latest reported movements of Russian forces are now causing panic and confusion in Georgia. These Russian troops suddenly appeared near the West Georgian town of Zubdidi, and there are unconfirmed reports that their armored troops have pushed even further south. Georgia is now a nation besieged by fear and rumor, and in military terms, increasingly defenseless. Julian Mannion, ITV News, Tbilisi.
Despite those pictures, Moscow is bristling at accusations that it is the aggressor in this conflict. The military insists its actions are aimed at protecting Russian peacekeepers and citizens in the region. Earlier, Afanula Sweeney spoke to Russian lawmaker Konstantin Kosachev. She began by asking him if Russian troops will be pushing all the way into the Georgian capital, Tbilisi.
Definitely not. It is not needed. I do remember how NATO forces, including the United States forces, were bombing the capital of Serbia, Belgrade, trying to prevent humanitarian catastrophe, as they described it, in Kosovo, far away from the capital city. This is not definitely our way of doing things. We are not going to bomb Tbilisi or any other Georgian city.
But wherein do you believe a military or a diplomatic solution will come once you, as you put it, restore order and lay the basis for a diplomatic solution? I mean, is your leadership talking to the Georgian leadership right now? Is there any direct negotiations or consultations?
Unfortunately not, because we do not trust any longer the Georgian leadership. Mr. Saakashvili was repeatedly telling us, the Washington, the European capitals, that he was not going to use military force in this conflict. 3 hours before the start of that military operation, Mr. Saakashvili declared a ceasefire, and later in the night he gave instructions to start bombing the capital city of South Ossetia and villages there. And we know the result: more than 2,000 people assassinated, killed. We do not trust Mr. Saakashvili. We do not see any perspective.
So then who would be an honest broker
in
Russia's opinion?
Well, it is not up to us to take that decisions. It's up to the Georgian people. I believe that in this situation, Mr. Saakashvili did not act as a president of the whole Georgia.
Fair enough, but what I'm trying to ascertain here is at what point, if you need a diplomatic solution and you don't want to talk directly to the Georgian president right now, then from where do you believe a diplomatic solution can be negotiated? The European Union, the OSCE?
The political dialogue is needed not between Russia and Georgia, and that was not the case any time in the past. The political dialogue is needed between Tbilisi and Tskhinvali, and Mr. Saakashvili was making the same mistake during all these years, trying to present this situation as a conflict between Tbilisi and Moscow. This is completely false. The conflict has always been between Tbilisi and Tskhinvali.
Where do you believe a diplomatic solution will come?
Well, it depends again on Georgia, on its action. As soon as Georgia has interrupted its military activities towards South Ossetia, the basis for resumed political talks is there, and then it's up to Georgia and South Ossetia and Abkhazia to resume these talks if they want to do it, and I am very doubtful about whether it will be possible after what Mr. Saakashvili has done towards the South Ossetian people.
But it's my understanding that Russia militarily has by far the upper hand in the region at the moment, and the Georgians have called again for a ceasefire, which is being ignored by Moscow. So, again, what I'm trying to ascertain, at what point will Moscow be ready for a negotiated diplomatic solution? When they've completely taken over South Ossetia and Georgia as well?
Again, we are not a participating part in that conflict. And we are not a partner for Georgia for any diplomatic talks. All we may talk about is about stopping, preventing any possibilities for any military violent clashes. And we are going to have that type of dialogue, but it's not about the solution of the conflict itself. It's about how we will get out of this situation which was established, which was provoked by Mr. Saakashvili.
Let me ask, if I may, in terms of how Russia is trying to conclude these military activities and ultimately find a diplomatic solution, does Moscow ultimately believe that South Ossetia should remain part of Georgia?
It's not up to us to take decisions on that. It's up to the people living in South Ossetia. We were trying since 1992 to calm down emotions and to assist to a political dialogue between Tbilisi and Tskhinvali. And Russian military presence in the region, I mean our peacekeepers, has, for example, saved the Georgian villages from very big problems during the initial part of the conflict. We were there in order to help, to assist people living there to find a political solution among themselves. It has failed, and the failure is on the Georgian side. It's on the side of Mr. Saakashvili taking that completely unresponsible action towards South Ossetia. So now I do not believe in any real political prospect for a real political process between Tbilisi and Tskhinvali, unfortunately.
And that was Russian lawmaker Konstantin Kosachev. Now, in other news this morning, talks to bring an end to the political standoff in Zimbabwe are to resume on Tuesday. A second round of negotiations Monday between President Robert Mugabe and opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai did not result in a power-sharing agreement. Mr. Mugabe says several sticking points, quote, will be overcome. The president is widely accused of stealing the runoff election in June by using violence and intimidation.
Well, they are ostracized, attacked, sometimes even killed.
And what makes the abuse even more shocking is it comes at the hands of family members.
Officials in Britain are stepping up their campaign against so-called honour violence, women abused for defying their family's wishes.
And as Paula Newton reports, these shocking crimes are on the rise.
Her boyfriend records it all on a mobile phone. Banats Mahmoud lays on a hospital bed, describing what she herself couldn't believe. Her own father was trying to kill her just for having a boyfriend he didn't approve of. That was December 2005. Just months later, Banaz disappeared. Her body was later found